My name is Elena Moore, and for the longest time, I believed being good was enough. Not exceptional. Not explosive. Just good. A quiet kind of good, the dependable daughter, the polite girl who always cleaned her plate and said thank you. But in a house like mine, goodness without spectacle meant invisibility. We lived in Willow Ridge, a sleepy town nestled between two hills in northern Vermont. Our house was the image of suburban charm: white shutters, a mailbox shaped like a birdhouse, and tulips that bloomed in perfect rows every spring. But no one looking from the outside could have guessed the quiet hierarchy that ruled inside. I was the eldest child of Caroline and Thomas Moore, two overachievers with a deep affection for excellence, and an even deeper obsession with their younger daughter, Isabel. My father was a mechanical engineer who loved algorithms more than people. He kept spreadsheets for everything: budgeting, grocery shopping, even our family's monthly progress goals. My mother was a former child psychologist turned freelance columnist, constantly reading parenting blogs and self-help books, always searching for ways to enhance development. Unfortunately, I was their first experiment, and apparently, a failed one. When I was little, I thought my parents were just busy. That maybe I hadn't done enough to earn their attention. But I remember the day that illusion shattered. I was 3 and still couldn't recite the alphabet backward, something my mother insisted was a reasonable cognitive milestone. She leaned against the kitchen counter and sighed loudly to my father, not realizing I could hear. She's slower than I expected. I think we missed her golden stage. I didn't know what golden stage meant back then. But I understood enough to know it was something I'd already lost. Then Isabel was born. From the moment she arrived, the house was filled with soft jazz, color-coded toys, and a constant stream of flashcards and puzzles. She had an entire room converted into a learning zone. The walls were covered in alphabet murals, and a speaker system played classical music on loop. I was moved into a room next to the laundry nook. Isabel got sensory integration training at 2. I got workbooks from the dollar store and instructions to try harder. I built Lego castles in the corner while Mom praised Isabel for identifying shapes or mimicking new words. "She's already doing sequences," she once said with awe. Then glanced at me, building quietly in the corner, and said, "Elena, make sure you don't leave a mess." It wasn't just parenting. It was performance parenting. And I was never part of the act. When I was 8, I brought home a painting I'd done at school. It was a landscape, rolling hills, trees swaying under a watercolor sky. I was proud of it. I remember running in after class, holding it out like a treasure. Mom glanced at it while unpacking groceries. "Nice," she said, barely looking up. Isabel read a whole book out loud today. A chapter book. Isn't that amazing? The words didn't hurt at first. They confused me. But by the time I was 10, I stopped bringing my wins home. No one clapped when I got a perfect score in science. No one noticed when I won a classroom spelling bee. And when I cried silently in bed, staring at the shadowy ceiling, I told myself, "Don't be dramatic. You're just not special." The real betrayal came 2 years later. I had always had my own bedroom, the one upstairs with the view of the trees. It was my sanctuary. I taped drawings on the walls, hung glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling, and read under the covers with a flashlight every night. Then one day, Isabel walked in, holding a juice box like a royal decree. "Mom says I'm taking your room." I stared at her. "No. That's my room." She shrugged. "It's bigger. I need space for my new desk." I ran downstairs, my heart pounding. "Mom?" She didn't even look up from her laptop. "You're older now. You don't need a big room. Don't be selfish, Elena. It's just a room." 24 hours later, my things were shoved into the boxy room off the kitchen, the one that smelled like detergent and had no window. My art supplies were crammed onto a shelf that slanted. My bed pressed against the wall like an afterthought. That night, I sat on the edge of my too small bed. My hands were fists in my lap. I stared at the chipped paint on the walls and whispered to myself, I'm just space filler. A mistake they're trying to make disappear. By the time I entered high school, I had stopped expecting fairness. Or attention. Or affection. Isabel, now a rising star at a private school across town, had a chauffeur and a weekend tutor. I walked to public school in the snow. I packed my own lunch and learned how to fix the leaky faucet in the downstairs bathroom myself. My parents called her our little miracle. I was simply responsible. But I kept going. Quietly. Determinedly. By the time I was 17, I had a 4.0 GPA, led 2 school clubs, and worked part-time at a bookstore after class. I didn't need applause. I needed out. College became my ticket. While Isabel prattled about summer programs and mock trial trophies, I quietly applied to 5 universities on my own. I wrote my own essays, submitted my FAFSA, and spent nights researching scholarships under a flickering desk lamp. Then one night, at dinner, Grandma Edith, my mom's mother, asked me, "So, Elena, where are you applying to school?" I looked up from my plate, startled that someone remembered I existed. "I got into Colton University," I said, swallowing. "They gave me a partial scholarship. I am hoping for more aid to cover the rest." There was a beat of silence. Then my mom set down her fork sharply. "Elena," she said. "We talked about this. Your father and I can't help financially this year." I blinked. "But you said there were savings." Dad cleared his throat. "We need to prioritize Isabel. She got into an Ivy League summer institute. It's a rare opportunity." Grandma Edith's eyes narrowed. "And Elena?" My mother sighed. "She can take a gap year. Work. Or do community college." It wasn't even cruel. It was casual. I looked across the table, and in that moment, I saw it clearly, they never planned for me to win. That night, as I washed dishes, Grandma came into the kitchen and slipped a small envelope onto the counter. "We'll cover your tuition," she said. "All of it." My eyes filled with tears. "Grandma, that's an investment," she said. "In someone who never stopped trying, even when no one noticed." And that was the moment something in me changed. Not because I was saved. But because I finally saw myself as worthy of being seen. College didn't feel like freedom at first. It felt like silence. The kind of silence that wraps around you when you're used to being ignored, but suddenly realize no one even knows your name. At Colton University, I wasn't the forgotten daughter anymore, I was just another freshman trying to find her way. And for a while, I stayed small. Head down. Hoodie up. Backpack tight against my shoulders like a shield. But in that quiet, something started to shift. It began with my intro to business class. The professor, a no-nonsense woman named Dr. Rena Lark, didn't care about charm. She cared about logic, precision, and creative thinking. I aced the first quiz. Then the midterm. Then she called on me during a debate and I laid out a strategy so solid, even the cocky business majors 2 rows behind me stopped talking. After class, she pulled me aside. "You have a mind for structure," she said. "Don't waste it playing small." It was the first time anyone had ever said that to me. That night, I walked back to my dorm and sat at my desk staring at my reflection in the black screen of my laptop. For the first time, I asked myself, what if I didn't need to fight for space? What if I built my own? I poured myself into everything, late-night study sessions, business simulations, part-time shifts at a downtown cafe where I learned how real customers think. I joined the campus investment club and quickly rose from quiet member to vice president, managing a student-run fund that outperformed our mock competitors by 13% in 1 quarter. At night, I called Grandma Edith and Grandpa Henry. Every Sunday. They always picked up. Always listened. Always ended the call with, "We're proud of you, kiddo. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." My parents never called. Isabel didn't text. The house I came from might as well have been a different world. And I didn't miss it. Because for the first time, I was becoming someone. By senior year, I had secured a competitive internship with Silverstone Holdings, a rising financial firm in Portland. The interview had been brutal: 3 managers, a glass-walled room, 1 whiteboard problem. But I nailed it. Not with flair, but with precision. What's the most important factor in designing a risk management model? One of them asked. I replied, without hesitation. Understanding the people behind the numbers. The data tells you what's happening. Psychology tells you why. 2 days later, I had the offer. The internship turned into a full-time role after graduation. At Silverstone, I wasn't just a number cruncher. I was the one staying late, refining risk algorithms and finding patterns others overlooked. I built models that anticipated market shifts based on consumer sentiment and global events, not just trend lines. I kept my head down, but my ideas spoke for themselves. 1 year in, I caught a red flag. A cluster of tech stocks our firm had invested in were showing signs of inflated performance. Everyone else called it a surge. I called it a mirage. I spent 72 hours building a 35-page report outlining the inconsistencies: internal product purchases disguised as external revenue spikes with no consumer growth, and ghost transactions between sister companies. I brought the report straight to the executive boardroom. When I finished presenting, the CFO leaned back, looked at the CEO, and said, "If we hadn't caught this, we'd be down 8 figures in Q2. She just saved our skin." They overhauled the portfolio. We not only avoided the loss, but posted a 12.5% gain that quarter. The highest in company history. A week later, I was promoted to strategic analyst. Then, a year after that, senior investment lead. But I wasn't done. Late nights became my forge. In the quiet of my apartment, with only the hum of my computer and a half-full mug of black coffee, I started working on a system I called Links, a hybrid analysis model that tracked financial risk through behavioral indicators, social media sentiment, cultural shifts, political trends. The things most firms dismiss as unquantifiable. I didn't. Links wasn't flashy, it was exact. When it predicted the downturn of a major e-commerce giant 3 days before the media caught wind, I presented the model to upper management. 3 months later, Links became part of our core strategy. And Silverstone Holdings? It leapt 2 ranks in the sector index. I was 27 when I was promoted to Director of Strategic Intelligence, the youngest in the company's history. They gave me an office with real walls. A team. A voice that echoed in boardrooms I never thought I'd be allowed into. Still, I never stopped being the girl who used to hide her paintings under her bed. So when my grandparents offered to host a small dinner to celebrate my new role, I suggested something bigger, a warm gathering, maybe 30 people. Close friends. Mentors. The people who helped me rise. I hesitated when my mother called. "We'd be happy to host," she said cheerfully. "Make it more intimate. It could be nice to have the family together again." Something in me whispered no. But another part, the one that still wanted to believe in second chances, nodded. I wired her $4,000. She insisted she'd handle the rest. "Don't worry about anything, Elena," she said. "You've done enough." I believed her. Until I walked through the front door. The house was glowing. White lilies, crystal-cut flutes, rose gold banners, and chandeliers hired just for the event. I blinked. It was far more extravagant than I had planned. My grandparents were there, standing off to the side, chatting with a few of my old college friends. Then I saw Isabel. Descending the stairs in a floor-length silver dress, makeup flawless, hand in hand with a man I didn't recognize. I turned to speak. But my mother stood and raised a glass. "Everyone, thank you for coming. We're here to celebrate something truly special. Isabel and Jacob's engagement." The room erupted. Laughter. Applause. Cheers. And me? I stood there, glass in hand, face burning. I had paid for this party. And once again, I'd been erased. I should have walked out. That would have been easier, quieter. A graceful exit, just like the version of me my parents always preferred. Polite. Measured. Unseen. But as I stood there, champagne flute trembling in my hand, watching the celebration of Isabel's engagement take over a party I had paid for, a party meant to honor my own hard-earned promotion, I felt something stir inside me. Something I'd kept buried for years beneath fake smiles, nods of quiet obedience, and the painful skill of biting my tongue. It wasn't anger, exactly. It was clarity. And clarity doesn't whisper. It roars. I stepped toward the front of the room, my heels clicking against the polished hardwood like punctuation. My mother was mid-toast, beaming as Isabel clutched her fiancé's arm. The crowd was still clapping when I raised my glass and cleared my throat. "Excuse me," I said, voice calm but sharp. "May I have just a moment?" The clinking stopped. A hush fell over the room. My father narrowed his eyes from across the crowd. My mother froze, still holding her glass midair. Isabel blinked, lips parted. "This event," I said slowly, "was never meant to be an engagement party." I turned, facing the room head-on. It was meant to be a celebration of a career milestone I've worked 10 years to reach. I recently became Director of Strategic Intelligence at Silverstone Holdings, and I wanted to share that moment with the people who've supported me. I paused, scanning the faces, some stunned, others now unsure where to look. I paid for this event. All of it. From the catering to the flowers to the banner that should have said "Congratulations, Elena." But instead, my family turned it into yet another stage for someone else. I turned to my mother. "You never even told me this would be about Isabel." She didn't speak. Her smile was frozen, the kind that cracks under pressure. Then I looked at Isabel. "I'm happy you're engaged. Truly. But you had no right to hijack my celebration." Isabel took a step forward, face flushed. "I didn't know Mom was going to announce it like that." I raised an eyebrow. "And the dress? The custom cake with your names on it? The monogrammed cocktail napkins?" A few guests chuckled nervously. Isabel's fiancé, Jacob, stepped away slightly, his expression shifting from celebratory to deeply uncomfortable. "You told me this was a small family gathering," he said quietly to her. "I was going to tell you, after," Isabel whispered, grabbing his hand. "I just wanted it to feel special." Jacob let his hand fall to his side. "Using your sister's money and her moment to do it isn't special. It's manipulative." He set his glass on a nearby table, adjusted his blazer, and walked straight out the door without looking back. Isabel stood frozen, her eyes welling up as murmurs rippled through the guests. Then I felt it, the familiar hand of my father on my wrist, firm and cold. "Don't make a scene," he hissed. "If you walk out now or keep this up, you're done. No contact. No inheritance. Don't expect anything from this family ever again." His grip was hard. His tone final. But this time, I didn't shrink. I didn't look for a compromise. I pulled my wrist free and said, "Then cut me off." Gasps echoed. My grandparents stood near the bar, silent but watching. "I've been erased, overlooked, and silenced my entire life," I said, turning back to the room. "When I won my first art contest, no one clapped. When I got into college on my own, no one asked how I did it. When I launched Links and saved my company from an 8-figure loss, not one of you said congratulations." My voice didn't shake. Not once. "I'm done begging to be seen in my own family." My mother stepped forward then, face red. "You think this makes you powerful? Humiliating your sister in front of everyone?" I met her gaze without flinching. "No. Speaking the truth doesn't humiliate anyone. But it does expose what's been allowed for far too long." She opened her mouth to respond, but my grandfather's voice cut through the silence like a bell. "That's enough, Caroline." Everyone turned. My grandfather, Henry Moore, stepped forward, with my grandmother Edith beside him. He looked at my parents with a calm I'd only seen a few times in my life, and every time, Something permanent had followed. "We updated our will," he said clearly. 3 months ago. My mother blinked. "What?" "The estate," he continued, "our house, our savings, our investment shares, everything we've built. It's all going to Elena." The room erupted again, but not with applause. With shock. "You're joking," my mother spat. "She's not even your biological child, Isabel is." Grandma Edith stepped forward then, her voice soft but piercing. "And Elena is the only one who never asked for anything. Never expected to be handed the world. And never used her sister's shadow to shine." Isabel let out a choked sound and ran up the stairs, heels clattering against wood, her silver dress flaring behind her like a curtain falling on the final act. My mother stood alone. My father was silent. And I finally felt free. I turned toward my grandparents, eyes stinging. "I never needed the inheritance," I whispered. "I just wanted to be seen." Grandpa Henry smiled. "And now the world sees you. Because you saw yourself first." I walked out the same front door I once left behind in silence. But this time, I wasn't leaving a home. I was stepping away from a cage. Outside, the wind smelled like lilacs and spring. Behind me, the party unraveled. But ahead of me, life was finally unfolding as mine. The next morning, I woke up in my grandparents' guest room, sunlight streaming through lace curtains, the scent of fresh cinnamon rolls wafting from the kitchen. I lay there for a moment, staring at the ceiling, my mind replaying the night before. The confrontation. The walkout. The silence afterward that felt like the softest thunder, rolling, inevitable, liberating. I hadn't planned to say any of it. I didn't walk into that party with the intention of reclaiming a decade of silence. But when the mic was metaphorically passed to me, I didn't flinch. And now, for the first time in my life, I felt what it meant to be heard. Downstairs, Grandma Edith was already setting the table. Grandpa Henry was humming some old Sinatra tune while squeezing orange juice by hand, because machines ruin the flavor, he always said. They didn't treat me like someone who had detonated the family peace. They treated me like someone who had finally come home. We didn't talk much about what happened the night before. Grandma handed me a cup of tea and simply said, "You did what needed to be done." I nodded. That was all I needed. In the weeks that followed, the fallout from that evening rippled in quiet waves. My parents didn't call. Isabel sent one text. "You ruined everything." I didn't reply. They had spent a lifetime acting like I didn't exist. Now they were just getting a taste of their own silence. But unlike theirs, mine wasn't cruel. It was cleansing. And in the quiet, I didn't feel lost. I felt clear. At work, things only accelerated. Lynx, my behavioral finance tool, was now fully integrated into Silverstone Holdings' market strategy. Our quarterly performance outpaced every competitor in our sector. I led 2 new international partnerships, delivered a keynote at a finance symposium in Toronto, and was invited to mentor female interns through the company's leadership track. People listened to me in rooms where no one had once even acknowledged my presence. And not because I was loud, but because my words had weight. I had created that weight. Earned it. Sharpened it like a blade forged in heat and pressure. On the day I turned 30, the boardroom was full of colleagues gathered for what I thought was a simple team huddle. Then the CEO, James Hanley, stood and made an announcement. As I prepare to step down after a 27-year career, I'm proud to name my successor, a strategist, innovator, and leader who redefined how we see markets. And each other. Our new CEO of Silverstone Holdings, Elena Moore. My ears rang. Not from shock. But from the sudden realization that I had made it all the way to the top, without shortcuts, without favors, without family backing. Every late-night spreadsheet. Every unpaid internship. Every gut instinct that told me keep going when the world tried to quiet me. I wasn't just in the room. I was leading it. That evening, I didn't throw a gala. I didn't fly to Paris or buy a penthouse. I drove an hour north to the small red brick house that had always felt like safety. My grandparents were waiting on the porch. Grandma Edith had baked a lemon bundt cake. Grandpa Henry was in his flannel robe, pretending not to tear up when I showed them the official letter. "You're the youngest CEO in Silverstone's history," he whispered, glasses fogging. "And the most deserving one." We sat on the back porch, warm tea in hand, wrapped in blankets, watching the stars rise. It was quiet. Beautifully quiet. "Did you ever think we'd be here?" I asked them. Grandma smiled. "We always knew where you were headed. You just had to stop letting other people drive." A few weeks later, a letter arrived. Not a text. Not an email. An actual letter. Handwritten. With my mother's script on the envelope. "Elena. We didn't expect you to embarrass the family like that. But maybe it needed to happen. Isabel isn't speaking to us either. Your father's confused. We all are. Still, I hope you're well. Your promotion was in the papers. Congratulations, I suppose. Mom." I folded the letter once, then twice. I didn't throw it away. But I didn't write back either. Some bridges burn quietly. Some, you let crumble naturally. And some, you simply walk past without looking back. But not everything faded. Isabel resurfaced 2 months later. She showed up in the lobby of my office building wearing oversized sunglasses and carrying a leather tote that screamed, "I'm still relevant." "I'm not here to fight," she said immediately, when I stepped down to meet her. I waited. She exhaled. "I don't understand how you did it. Without anyone helping you. I've had everything, and somehow, I'm still stuck." I looked at her. Not with anger. Not even pity. Just clarity. "Because when you start from nothing," I said, "you have no one to carry you. So you learn to carry yourself." She didn't respond. Just nodded slowly, then left. I don't know if she'll ever change. But I knew one thing as I walked back upstairs to my corner office. I had already changed. And I wasn't shrinking again for anyone. That summer, Silverstone launched a new initiative, Project Lift, a mentorship and scholarship program for young women in finance from underrepresented backgrounds. We held our first summit in a small auditorium downtown. When I took the stage, the room was filled with 200 aspiring minds, bright, brilliant, and brave. I told them this. Some of us aren't born into spotlights. Some of us have to build our own. But once you light it, never let anyone dim it again. They stood. Clapped. Some even cried. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like the girl who had to prove herself. I felt like the woman who had finally become herself. 3 years have passed since I walked out of my parents' house for the last time. 3 years since I stood in a room full of people, some smiling, some sneering, and claimed the moment that was always mine. Since I dropped the weight of needing approval and finally felt how light life could be without it. Today, I don't live in a mansion or a penthouse. I chose a quiet loft in downtown Portland, exposed brick, oversized windows, and too many bookshelves. On Saturday mornings, sunlight floods the kitchen while I grind coffee beans and listen to vinyl records. It's peaceful. It's mine. And that's all I ever wanted, a life that belonged to me. As CEO of Silverstone Holdings, I spend most of my days in strategy meetings, investor briefings, or reviewing reports that seem to multiply overnight. But every Monday morning, without fail, I start my week mentoring 3 interns, one-on-one. Why? Because once upon a time, I was the girl no one thought to mentor. The one who figured everything out the hard way. I've never forgotten that feeling. One intern, a sharp young analyst named Lena, asked me recently, "How did you keep going when no one believed in you?" I looked her in the eye and said, "I stopped waiting to be believed in." She blinked. I smiled. That's the moment everything changes, when you believe in yourself enough to stop asking for permission. My grandparents are still my constant. We do Sunday dinners, rain or shine. We rotate homes, Sometimes my loft, sometimes their little red brick cottage. Grandpa Henry still insists on hand-squeezed lemonade. Grandma Edith has taken up knitting again and recently gifted me a blanket embroidered with my initials and the phrase, "Seen. Heard. Enough." It made me cry. Not because of the gift, but because of what it meant. For so long, I fought to be enough in a house that only knew how to see through me. Now I sit at a table where love doesn't have to be earned with perfection. Just presence. As for my parents, I haven't heard much. Occasional updates reach me through old family friends or vague social media murmurs. Isabel moved back in with them after her engagement ended, and from what I hear, she's still trying to find her footing. One time, I bumped into her outside a bookstore. She was wearing designer sunglasses and carrying a latte she barely touched. She stopped in front of me and said, "I never wanted things to be like that between us." I nodded. Neither did I. She waited, as if expecting something more. A hug, a softening, a bridge. But I had none to give. Not out of anger, but out of peace. "Take care of yourself, Isabel," I said gently. And walked away. The truth is, some chapters close without apology. And that's okay. Because closure doesn't always come from others. Sometimes, it comes from choosing yourself. From looking in the mirror and saying, "I deserve better." And meaning it. A few months ago, Silverstone celebrated its 65th anniversary. The board asked me to speak at the gala. I stood at the podium, lights soft, hundreds of employees and stakeholders before me, and said this. Legacy isn't just about what we inherit. It's about what we choose to leave behind. I didn't come from power. I came from silence. And I turned it into a voice that built strategy, created change, and helped others find their own. They stood. Clapped. Some even wept. And I felt, again, that familiar flame inside me, not rage, not rebellion, but truth. After the event, Lena came up to me, her eyes wide. "Do you ever wish your family saw this version of you?" she asked. I thought about it. Then smiled. They had their chance. And I turned to join the team that saw me now, the one I had built, brick by brick, choice by choice. This is the life I made. A life not built from handouts or applause. A life born from late nights, quiet strength, and the decision to rise when no one clapped. A life where I no longer shrink to make others comfortable. Where I lead. Where I love. Where I live unapologetically me. Because I was never just anything. Not just the firstborn. Not just the backup. Not just the girl in the corner. I was always more. And now, I get to be all of it.